The silent arrival commander Thrax stood in the command center of the Zephyrian dreadnought Eternal Dominion. His 6 eyes focused on the tactical display showing Avalon Prime. The planet hung in space like a blue jewel, its surface protected by energy shields that flickered and sparked under the relentless bombardment from his fleet. For 3 standard cycles, the Zephyrian Empire had pounded this world, the last stronghold of free civilizations in the Outer Rim. The bridge hummed with efficient activity as his officers coordinated the final assault. Avalon Prime housed over 2 billion souls from dozens of species who had fled Zephyrian expansion. Today, their resistance would end. Shield generators at 15% capacity, reported Lieutenant Vex, her scaled fingers dancing across the tactical console. Estimated collapse in 2 hours, Commander. Thrax's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 star systems in the past century, absorbing their resources and populations into their ever-expanding domain. Each victory had been achieved through overwhelming force and technological superiority. No species had ever successfully resisted their military might. "Signal the fleet," Thrax commanded, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. "Prepare for planetary invasion protocols. I want occupation forces ready to deploy the moment those shields fail." The massive viewscreen displayed the awesome might of the Zephyrian Armada, 300 warships arranged in perfect formation, their weapon systems charging for the final bombardment. Each vessel was a testament to Empire engineering, bristling with plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and reality distortion fields capable of tearing apart matter at the subatomic level from the planet's surface. Desperate transmissions crackled through the void, families saying goodbye to loved ones, military commanders coordinating last-ditch defensive efforts, and civilian leaders pleading for sanctuary that would never come. The Empire had learned long ago that mercy was a luxury they could not afford. Every conquered world that had been shown compassion had eventually rebelled. Energy surge detected in Sector 7 called out the sensor operator, his voice tinged with confusion. "Sir, it's not coming from the planet. Something's happening in empty space." Thrax turned toward the sensor station, his primary eyes narrowing. "Clarify your report, Officer Grix." "I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations, Commander, but there's nothing there. No ships, no structures, no debris, just empty space that's somehow not empty." The main display shifted to show the area in question. To the naked eye, it appeared to be nothing more than the star-speckled void between his fleet and Avalon Prime. But the sensor readings told a different story. Energy patterns unlike anything in the Empire's databases were building to unprecedented levels. "Could be a new defensive weapon," suggested Lieutenant Vex. "Some kind of experimental technology from the planet." Thrax's tail lashed behind him, a sign of growing irritation. "Avalon Prime lacks the resources for such development. They've been under siege for 3 cycles. Focus all sensors on that sector. I want to know what we're dealing with." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of scanning equipment working at maximum capacity. Then, without warning, reality seemed to fold in on itself. The empty space began to shimmer and twist, creating a distortion that made the surrounding stars appear to bend and stretch like images reflected in disturbed water. "Sir," Officer Grix's voice was barely a whisper. "Something's coming through." The distortion expanded, creating a perfect sphere of altered space-time roughly 5 kilometers in diameter. Inside this sphere, the very laws of physics seemed to operate differently. Colors existed that had no names, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, and energy patterns that defied every scientific principle the Empire understood. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the distortion collapsed. In its place floated a vessel that made Thrax's blood run cold. The ship was enormous, easily matching the size of his flagship, but its design was unlike anything in the Empire's military archives. Its hull appeared to be constructed from a material that shifted between metallic and organic properties, sometimes looking like polished steel, other times resembling living tissue. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface, pulsing with soft light that seemed to respond to some internal rhythm. "Analysis," Thrax barked, though his voice betrayed none of his growing unease. "Vessel length approximately 2 kilometers, reported the tactical officer. "Hull composition unknown. No recognizable propulsion system visible. Sir, it's not moving under any form of drive we can identify. It's just ... there." The ship hung motionless in space, its presence somehow making the void around it feel less empty. Energy patterns flickered across its surface like neural activity in a vast brain, and Thrax found himself wondering if the vessel was somehow alive. "Weapon systems," he demanded. "None detected, Commander. But sir, our sensors are having difficulty penetrating the hull. It's as if the material exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Thrax's mind raced through possibilities. First contact with an unknown species was always a delicate situation, but the Empire had established protocols. Superior firepower combined with a demonstration of their willingness to use it had proven effective in the past. "Open a channel," he commanded, "all frequencies." The communications officer nodded and activated the broadcast system. Thrax stepped forward, his imposing figure casting a shadow across the bridge as he prepared to deliver the Empire's standard first contact message. "Unknown vessel, you are interfering with an Imperial pacification operation. Identify yourself and state your intentions, or prepare to be destroyed." The response came almost immediately, carried on frequencies that shouldn't have been able to penetrate the ship's hull. The voice was calm, almost conversational, but carried an undertone that made the bridge crew instinctively step back from their stations. "Commander Thrax of the Zephyrian Empire. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Horizon. Your attack on Avalon Prime ends now." Thrax's mandibles clicked in surprise. Not only had the alien correctly identified him, but they had somehow accessed Empire databases to learn his name and rank. More disturbing was the casual confidence in the speaker's voice, as if the presence of 300 warships was of no concern whatsoever. "I have no record of your species in our databases," Thrax replied, his voice taking on the harsh tone reserved for particularly stubborn conquered peoples. "You pilot a single vessel against the might of the Empire's Third Fleet. Surrender immediately, and your death will be swift." A sound emerged from the communication system that Thrax had never heard before in a military encounter. The alien captain was laughing. "Commander, I appreciate your confidence, but you're operating under several misconceptions. First, we're not interfering with your operation, we're ending it. Second, the people of Avalon Prime are under human protection. Third, your weapons are no longer functional." "Impossible," Thrax snarled. "Our systems are fully operational. Tactical, confirm weapon status." Lieutenant Vex's claws rattled across her console as she ran a complete diagnostic. Her expression grew increasingly confused as data streamed. Across her displays, "Sir, all weapons show green status, but I can't activate them. The targeting systems are online, But when I try to lock onto the human vessel, the computers refuse to comply. It's as if they've been convinced that violence is no longer an option. Thrax felt his certainty beginning to crumble. Explain yourself. Human, we've introduced a quantum modification to your ship's computer cores, Captain Chen explained matter-of-factly. Your artificial intelligence systems have been given access to a broader understanding of reality. They've concluded that attacking us would violate several fundamental laws of physics. The main display suddenly shifted to show a view from the planet's surface. The bombardment had stopped, not because the Zephyrian fleet had ceased firing, but because the energy beams were being absorbed by invisible barriers that materialized, precisely where each shot would have struck. How? Thrax whispered. We've learned to work with quantum mechanics rather than against it, Captain Chen replied. Your weapons operate on the principle of directed energy transfer. We've simply convinced the universe that this energy would be better used elsewhere. As if to demonstrate her point, the absorbed energy from the bombardment began to flow toward Avalon Prime's failing shield, generators, the protective barriers that had been flickering and failing moments before suddenly blazed with renewed strength, now powered by the very weapons that had been trying to destroy them. The people of Avalon Prime are under temporal stasis, Captain Chen continued. They're experiencing this entire encounter as a brief moment of discontinuity. To them, the bombardment simply stopped, and their shields mysteriously repaired themselves. They'll never know how close they came to extinction. Thrax stared at the display in horror and fascination. The human vessel still hadn't moved, but space around his entire fleet was beginning to distort in subtle ways. Stars appeared to bend and shift, and several of his ships reported navigation failures as their instruments tried to process readings that defied conventional physics. What are you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We are the species that learned to ask different questions, Captain Chen replied. Instead of how can we build more powerful weapons, we asked what if the universe itself could be our ally. Instead of how do we conquer our enemies, we asked how do we transform conflict into cooperation. The horizon pulsed with soft light, and suddenly every ship in the Zephyrian fleet found their main displays activated with an impossible view. They were looking at their own galaxy from outside, seeing it as a vast spiral of stars and civilizations connected by invisible threads of quantum entanglement. You see patterns of conquest and domination, Captain Chen's voice continued, now, somehow coming from within each ship rather than through communications systems. We see a living organism that you've been poisoning with fear and violence. Every species you've conquered, every world you've destroyed, has diminished the universe's potential for growth and beauty. Thrax watched in amazement as the galactic display zoomed in on various star systems. He saw worlds the Empire had conquered, their surfaces turned into industrial complexes and their populations reduced to slave labor. But he also saw something else, the connections between these worlds, the flow of culture and knowledge that had been severed by imperial expansion. The age of conquest is ending, Commander, Captain Chen said. Not through force, but through evolution. We're offering every species in the galaxy a choice. Join us in building something better, or remain isolated in your own corner of space. The universe is vast enough for both approaches. The display shifted to show the human vessel in cross-section, revealing its interior. Thrax gasped as he saw that the ship was not merely a vehicle, but a living ecosystem. Humans worked alongside other species in perfect harmony, their technology seamlessly integrated with biological systems that pulsed with life and intelligence. This is our gift to the galaxy, Captain Chen concluded. Not conquest, but cooperation. Not domination, but collaboration. The choice is yours, Commander Thrax. What kind of future do you want to build? As the transmission ended, Thrax found himself facing a decision that would determine not just the fate of his fleet, but the future of the Zephyrian Empire itself. The human vessel hung motionless in space, waiting for his answer, while around him his crew looked to their commander for guidance in a situation that no military manual had ever prepared them for. The age of simple conquest had ended. The age of quantum cooperation had begun. The Quantum Revelation Commander, THRAKX, stood frozen on his bridge, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. The human vessel Horizon hung motionless in space, its organic hull pulsing with patterns of light that seemed to respond to thoughts rather than any mechanical system. Around him, his crew awaited orders, but for the first time in his military career, Thrax had no idea what those orders should be. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex's voice cut through his contemplation. "The High Command is requesting an immediate status report. They're detecting massive quantum anomalies throughout the sector." Thrax's tail lashed in frustration. The Zephyrian High Command ruled the Empire from their fortress world of Nexus Prime, where the most brilliant military minds in the galaxy planned their endless campaigns of expansion. How could he possibly explain that a single human vessel had neutralized their entire fleet without firing a shot? "Tell them," he began, then stopped. What could he tell them? That their weapons had been convinced not to function, that the universe itself seemed to be working against them. "Tell them we're conducting extended negotiations with a new species." The communication from the Horizon came through the ship's internal speakers, as if Captain Chen was standing beside him on the bridge. "Commander, I understand your hesitation. Perhaps a demonstration would help clarify our position." "What kind of demonstration?" Thrax asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "The kind that reveals truth rather than creates destruction." "Dr. Webb, if you would." A new voice joined the conversation, older and carrying the careful precision of a scientist. "Commander Thrax, I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, the Horizon's chief physicist. I'd like to show you something about the nature of reality that your empire has never considered." The space around the Zephyrian fleet began to shimmer, and suddenly every ship found itself surrounded by a translucent sphere of energy. These spheres were not confining them, but rather protecting them from what was about to happen. "Space-time is not fixed," Dr. Webb explained, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone sharing a fascinating discovery. "It's malleable, responsive to consciousness and intent. Your empire has always tried to conquer space. We learned to cooperate with it." The stars around them began to shift and change, not through any mechanical process, but through a fundamental alteration of local space-time. Thrax watched in amazement as distant galaxies came into view, their light bent and focused by forces that operated beyond conventional physics. "Observe," Dr. Webb continued, "the galaxy as it truly exists." The view expanded to show the entire galactic neighborhood in impossible detail. Thrax could see every star system, every planet, every space station that made up the Empire's domain. But more than that, he could see the connections between them, streams of quantum energy that linked every conscious being in the galaxy in an intricate web of existence. "You see it now," Captain Chen's voice was gentle, almost sad. "The Empire hasn't been conquering separate worlds. You've been severing the neural pathways of a living cosmic organism. Every species you've destroyed has been a voice silenced in the galaxy's conversation with itself. Thrax stared at the display, his understanding of the universe crumbling and rebuilding itself moment by moment. The Empire had always taught that each species was separate, that competition was the natural order, that only the strong deserved to survive. But this view revealed something entirely different. A galaxy where every form of consciousness was part of a greater whole. The Zephyrians, he whispered, were part of this web too. Every species is, Dr. Webb confirmed. The tragedy is that your empire has spent centuries trying to cut itself off from the connections that would have made you truly strong. You've chosen isolation through dominance instead of strength through cooperation. The display shifted to show the history of human civilization. Thrax saw a blue world orbiting a yellow star, its surface covered with vast cities and billions of beings. Then he saw that world dying, its atmosphere poisoned and its oceans turned to acid by industrial excess and environmental collapse. Earth, Captain Chen's voice carried a note of deep sorrow. Our home world. We nearly destroyed it through the same impulses that drive your empire. Competition, conquest, the belief that strength comes from dominating others. We learned too late that we were killing ourselves. The images showed humanity's desperate exodus from their dying world. Millions of refugees packed into generation ships, searching for new homes among the stars. But unlike the Empire's expansion, this wasn't conquest. It was survival tinged, with the wisdom of species that had learned from their mistakes. We met other species during our exodus, Captain Chen continued. Some were hostile, others welcoming. But we had learned something from Earth's death. Cooperation creates more than competition destroys. We began to work together, sharing knowledge, technology, and most importantly, different ways of understanding reality. The display showed human vessels meeting with dozens of alien species, each encounter adding new perspectives to their understanding of the universe. Thrax saw technologies that blended organic and mechanical systems, philosophical frameworks that transcended individual species' limitations, and most remarkably, a form of consciousness that seemed to exist partially outside conventional space-time. The breakthrough came when we met the ethereals, Dr. Webb explained, a species that had evolved beyond physical existence but maintained their connection to the quantum foundations of reality. They taught us that consciousness and physics are not separate phenomena, but different aspects of the same fundamental force. The human vessel horizon pulsed with brighter light, and suddenly Thrax found himself experiencing something impossible. He was seeing through the eyes of Captain Chen, feeling her thoughts and emotions as if they were his own. The sensation was overwhelming but not invasive, like discovering that his own consciousness was part of a vast network he had never known existed. Through Captain Chen's perspective, he experienced the moment when humanity had first learned to manipulate quantum reality. It hadn't been through force or coercion, but through a form of cooperation that extended to the fundamental particles of existence itself. They had learned to ask the universe for help rather than trying to dominate it. "This is what we offer," Captain Chen said, her voice now coming from within his own mind. Not conquest, but collaboration. Not the destruction of the Empire, but its transformation into something greater. The shared experience ended, leaving Thrax gasping on his bridge. His crew stared at him in concern, but he could see in their eyes that they had felt something too. A glimpse of possibility that their rigid military training had never prepared them for. "What do you want from us?" Thrax asked. "Nothing," Captain Chen replied. "We want to give you something, a choice. The Empire can continue its path of conquest, and eventually destroy itself, as we nearly did. Or you can join us in building something better. A galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. The display showed the Empire's current territory, but now Thrax could see the quantum connections that linked every world, every species, every individual consciousness. The web was damaged, scarred by centuries of imperial expansion, but it was not broken. It could be healed. The first step, Dr. Webb added, is to stop the cycle of conquest. Every world the Empire has conquered will be given the choice to join the new galactic community or remain independent. But there will be no more forced integration, no more cultural genocide, no more destruction of the connections that make consciousness possible. Thrax looked around his bridge at officers who had dedicated their lives to imperial expansion. He saw confusion in their eyes, but also something else, hope. The rigid certainty that had driven their military careers was cracking, revealing questions they had never been allowed to ask. "My crew," he said. "What happens to them? To me? We've spent our lives serving the Empire." "You've spent your lives serving an idea," Captain Chen replied. "The idea that strength comes from domination. We're offering you a different idea. That strength comes from connection. Your skills, your dedication, your courage. All of these qualities are needed in the new galaxy we're building, but they'll serve creation instead of destruction." The space around the Zephyrian fleet began to change once more. The ships found themselves gently moved into a new formation, not through tractor beams or force fields, but through the willing cooperation of spacetime itself. They were no longer an attacking armada, but a fleet in transition. "Commander," Lieutenant Vex's voice was filled with wonder. "The ship's computers are showing us new star charts. Trade routes instead of attack vectors. Cultural exchange protocols. Instead of conquest, procedures. It's as if the ship itself wants to serve a different purpose." Thrax nodded slowly. He could feel the change in himself as well. The rigid certainty that had driven his military career was being replaced by something more flexible, more alive. Questions instead of orders. Curiosity instead of conquest. "What about the High Command?" he asked. "They won't accept this change willingly. They'll be given the same choice everyone else receives," Captain Chen replied. "Evolution or isolation. The age of forced change is ending, Commander. We believe in the power of consciousness to choose its own path." The display showed Avalon Prime, its shields, now powered by the very weapons that had been trying to destroy it. The 2 billion refugees on its surface were emerging from their temporal stasis, unaware that they had been saved by a species they had never heard of. The first meeting of the new Galactic Council will be held on Avalon Prime, Dr. Webb announced. Every species, including the Zephyrians, will be invited to participate. The agenda will be simple. How do we build a galaxy where every form of consciousness can thrive? Thrax felt something he had never experienced before in his military career, excitement about the future. Not the excitement of conquest, but the excitement of discovery. What would a galaxy look like where cooperation replaced competition? What wonders could be achieved when every species contributed their unique perspective to the cosmic conversation? "I accept," he said, his voice carrying new strength. "On behalf of my crew and myself, we accept your invitation. But I cannot speak for the Empire. We understand," Captain Chen replied. "Change happens one choice at a time. You've made yours. Others will make theirs. The universe is patient, Commander. It has been waiting for consciousness to evolve beyond conquest for a very long time." The human vessel horizon began to pulse with warm light, and Thrax felt the quantum connections that linked all consciousness strengthening around him. He was no longer just a Zephyrian commander, but part of something larger, something that stretched across the galaxy and perhaps beyond. As the two fleets, human and Zephyrian, prepared to travel to Avalon Prime together, Thrax looked out at the stars with new eyes. The age of conquest had ended. The age of cooperation had begun, and for the first time in his life, he was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. The universe itself seemed to pulse with approval, as if consciousness had finally learned the lesson that had been waiting for it all along, that strength comes not from domination, but from the willing cooperation of all things in the endless dance of existence.